Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is James Bogart. I'm CEO and president of Bogart Wealth. Thanks for taking some time to watch the presentation on after-tax rollovers and the mega backdoor Roth conversion. Just a couple quick administrative things. I do have the question and answer open as well as the chat box open. We are also recording this webinar, so if you happen to miss any of it or have any friends or colleagues who would benefit from it, please feel free. We will be sending it out, but we'll also have it on the website probably this afternoon, maybe tomorrow at the latest. But without further ado, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. So just a quick introduction. Bogart Wealth is a registered investment advisory firm. We're fully independent. We're managing approximately $1.3 billion of client assets, just under 800 households. About 90% of them are from the energy sector. We are true fiduciaries for our clients. It means that we're legally obligated to put your interest above our own. No hidden agendas, no conflicts of interest. I do think that ultimately anyone who's considering hiring an advisor, they do need to be a true fiduciary. We have 19 folks actually now on our wealth management and planning team, as well as 4 on our tax team. We have 3 different office locations, one in McLean, Virginia, one in Houston, Texas, and then one in the Woodlands, Texas. Our mission is to help our clients achieve financial peace of mind by preserving and maximizing intergenerational wealth. You know, what we've found is that your kids and your parents can be some of the largest variables of anyone's financial plan. We've made it part of our firm's culture to give them access to certified financial planners. Now, one of the this is part of what we call our retirement readiness series. And for anybody who's not familiar with us, we do a lot of educational content. Our why is to educate. It's all up on our website. You can see all the previous versions of different presentations we've done. Some are customized to particular companies, some are on more generic topics. But we do one on the retirement planning timeline. We do one on the retirement income planning. We do one on Social Security and Social Security strategies. One on some tax planning and tax law strategies. One on the estate planning strategies, one on net unrealized depreciation and post-retirement income strategies, one on long-term care and long-term care insurance, and then one on Roths versus traditional IRAs and 401ks. Thanks for I already had a comment come in that the catering for these seminars has really gone downhill. Yeah, I get a good chuckle out of that, but we used to do these very much as live events, and with COVID, we pivoted to do the educational content on webinars, and candidly, they've been very well attended and pretty popular. Now, off of any of the presentations we do, one of the calls to action is to actually sit down and do a complimentary financial planning session. It truly is absolutely no cost, absolutely no obligation. And even if it's just wanting to get our input on particular strategies, for example, like the mega backdoor, we do like to integrate it into someone's overall financial plan, but we have made it part of the educational events that we do as well. All right, so today we're really going to focus a lot on mega backdoors, but in order to get there, I wanted to start with a brief overview of retirement plan account types. We're going to talk about Roth conversions and some of the basics around Roth conversions. And then we're going to talk about how the mega backdoor Roth strategy actually works. I've got a couple different examples of those. And then I also wanted to talk a little bit about in-plan Roth conversions and after-tax withdrawals. Like I said earlier, I do have the chat box open and the question and answer open. So please feel free, beat me up. Definitely love to have some questions. All right, so to get started, we talked first about qualified accounts. Now, qualified accounts are really talking about 401k accounts, IRA accounts, 403bs, 457s. You know, and first we talk about the good part, then we'll talk about what we call the other part. But the good part is with qualified plans, this is money you put in on a before tax basis. So you put the dollars in, it reduces your taxable income by that related amount. You do not pay any tax on the gains or appreciation until you take the money out. You don't pay any tax on dividends, and traditionally you will receive the benefit of a company match to the traditional 401k portion of your plan. Now, there are some negatives to qualified plans. The first is if you're under age 59 and a half, there's a 10% withdrawal penalty. Every dollar you put in plus the appreciation off of it, when you take that money out, you have to pay ordinary income on those funds. And then also when you reach that magical age of age 72, you have what are called required minimum distributions. Now, required minimum distributions, you might hear me use the acronym RMD today a couple different times. But what these are is when you turn the age of 72, you're required to start taking out a percentage from your account percentage from your qualified accounts each year. And that percentage increases as you get older. And so it's can be very detrimental. There's a 50% penalty for any funds that are required to be taken out that you miss. And it's something that we want to make sure that you're very religiously following and tracking to ensure that you're appropriately taking out at least the minimum required amount. Now you can always take out more, but you have to take out that minimum amount. So with qualified plans, we talk a little bit about contribution limits, and then I'm going to come back to this real quickly. But 401ks, 403bs, as well as Roth 401ks, if you're under the age of 50, you can put 19,500 into these plans. If you're over the age of 50, you can put an additional 6,500 into these plans. Now, for 2021, the plan limitation did increase up to a total balance of 58,000 can go into these plans if you're under the age of 50. That's up from 57,000. But and also the catch-up contribution, if you include that in, it's a total contribution of 64,500 into the plan. So I'll just use an example for somebody who's over the age of 50. You can put 26,000 in, so that's the 19,500 plus the 6,500 into the plan. And then any amount that a company matches, well, that let's just, for example purposes, let's say that it's 13,000, excuse me, 14,000. So that brings us to a total of 40,000. That means that if you're over the age of 50, you can do an additional 24,500 in what's called an after-tax contribution. And I'm setting the stage for where we're going with this today. Now, in that same example, let's say there is no company match, which several companies have suspended their 401k contributions this year. So again, you can put 26,000 in on a before tax basis, but that leaves an additional 38,500 that you can put in on an after tax basis. Now, real quick, I want to talk about IRA accounts. So this is specifically traditional IRA accounts. These are in addition to what you put into your 401k plan. You have the ability to do $6,000 into a traditional IRA if you're under the age of 50, and an extra $1,000 contribution if you're over the age of 50. Now, if you're not going to take a deduction off of it, there is no income limit. You can you put the 7,000 in each year and not have to worry about any tax implications there. Now, it's after tax money that you've put in, and any of the growth will all be pre-tax. Now, if you're going to take a deduction, there are a couple caveats here. Same contribution limits. So if you're under 50, $6,000, additional $1,000 catch up if you're over 50. But if you're covered by a 401k plan, that means that you have a retirement account available to you. In order to be able to deduct it, if you're single, you have to make under $76,000. If you're married, you have to make under $125,000. Now, if one spouse is covered by a plan, so let's say, for example, we have a working spouse and a non-working spouse, that threshold for eligibility for deduction increases. It starts to phase out at 198,000 of income, completely phases out at 208,000. So what that's saying is if you're married and you make over $208,000, you cannot even take a deduction. Your only option would be to do a contribution into an IRA that then is deductible. Is non-deductible. Now, this is actually what sets the stage for what's been known or called the backdoor Roth conversion, where you can actually put a non-deductible contribution into a traditional IRA and then convert it over to a Roth, and that's completely tax-free. I'm not going to focus on that today because we're actually talking about mega backdoors. And so related to this whole conversation, the progressive nature of our tax structure, and what I mean by that is our tax brackets currently go from 10% to 12% to 22% to 24% to 32% to 35% to 37%. The progressive nature of our tax structure actually allows someone to really want to maximize pre-tax contributions into their retirement plans first. So that's when I mentioned the $26,000 of contribution. We really are big advocates for putting them on a before tax basis to reduce the taxable income when you're most likely in the highest marginal tax brackets. And the reason for this is, and we'll get into some of the nuances with Roths in a second, but really we save at the highest marginal tax rate. So let's say, for example, somebody makes just say $329,000. Well, let's say they put 26,000 into a retirement plan. So it's actually reduced their tax exposure at the 24% marginal tax rate. Now, because when you pull money out of qualified plans, you pay ordinary income, what you pay is actually taxed at the average tax rate. So again, same example, let's say somebody's right at the top end of the 24% bracket. That means their effective tax rate or their average tax rate is actually 20.4%. So because what you're pulling it out at is lower than what you're saving it at, it actually makes sense to max out pre-tax contributions first. Okay, I've had a couple questions come in. I wanted to make sure I address this. Can you just put in 38,000 after tax, or is the 26.5 required to go in first and then the 38,000 after that? No, you actually can put every bit of contributions in on an after tax basis. I would argue that it doesn't necessarily make sense if you want to reduce taxable income at the highest marginal thresholds. But again, everyone's situation is slightly different. But because we have the ability, again, if you're over the age of 50, to put in $64,500 total, why not do pre-tax then after tax as well? And obviously, you know, the financial planner and us, I've used this joke at a lot of our presentations, but we'll have you save every dollar you make, leave nothing left to live on. Just like we'll have you work to your 80, you died 81, your plan's going to work great. Terrible joke, but there's a lot of truth to that. The more you save, the more you're going to have. The longer you work, the more you're going to have. And the concept really is we want to save tax efficiently along the way. All right, I had another question come in. Is there an absolute threshold in income above which you should go with before tax savings? You mentioned 350,000. No, I'm sorry. I use that as an example. Everyone's situation is going to be different. But let's say, for example, you make right above 81,000, which is the top end of the 12% bracket. Well, again, your average tax rate is only going to be 11.5%. So it's lower than whatever your marginal tax rate is. And in that example, let's say, for example, you have the ability to do 26,000 of savings at that marginal threshold. Well, you're saving exposure in the 22% bracket, what you would be paying tax on income at in the 22% bracket, as an example. That's a great question. All right, I wanted to talk a little bit real quickly about what a Roth account is. So Roth accounts are where you put savings in, whether it's a Roth IRA or a Roth 401k. You're going to put money in on an after-tax basis. So the growth will be tax-free, and you'll also have tax-free withdrawals of principal as long as it's been in existence for over 5 years and you're over the age of 59 and a half. Now, Roths are also not subject to required minimum distributions. Now, let me get a little bit more specific with this. Roth IRAs are not subject to required minimum distributions. However, Roth 401ks are. So one piece of planning advice, if you happen to have money saved in a Roth 401k in a retirement plan, make sure you roll it out into a Roth IRA prior to the age of 72, because otherwise that Roth money is going to have a required minimum distribution on it. The other nice piece about Roths is that your beneficiaries will inherit the money tax-free as well. Had another quick question come in. For 2020, is there a catch-up allowed for ExxonMobil savings plan? Like, how can you contribute to your 2020 IRA through 415? So great question. You have the ability to do a contribution to an IRA or Roth IRA for 2020 all the way through April 15th. Now, for 401ks, unfortunately, it has to be done within the calendar year. So if you wanted to do a after tax or a catch-up contribution or a Roth 401k contribution into your 401k, that's restricted to the calendar year. Any contributions that are done after the first of the year, they're counted to the next tax year. So they'll all be in 2021. Also a great question. All right. Now with Roths, Roths are interesting, right? So you would naturally feel like you'd want to get everything into Roth. One thing I will say from a planning perspective, we are big believers in there's benefit in having after-tax money, non-qualified money, so checking accounts, savings accounts, brokerage accounts. There's also benefit in having qualified money, so pre-tax money. And then there's also benefit in having Roth money. Now with Roths, there's only two ways of getting money into Roths, either contributions or conversions. So with contributions, if you wanted to just do a Roth IRA contribution, the the contribution threshold is the exact same. So it's $6,000 if you're under the age of 50 with an additional $1,000 of catch up. However, there's income thresholds in order to be eligible to do a Roth contribution. If you're single, it starts to phase out at 125,000. It completely phases out at 140. So if you make over 140,000, you can't even do a Roth contribution and you're single. If you're married, it starts to phase out at 198,000 and completely phases out at 208. So married households, if you make over 208,000, unfortunately, Roth contributions aren't even an option for you. Now, the second way to get money into Roths is actually what are called Roth conversions. There is no income limit on Roth conversions. And so this sets the stage for what we call that backdoor strategy, where you can put $7,000 into a traditional IRA and then immediately convert it when you over into a Roth. There is no income component to that because you've put after-tax money into a traditional IRA and then immediately convert it over. It's a saving strategy we look at. Now, some basics when it comes to Roth conversions and what these really are. So these are penalty-free taxable transfers. So it's important to know that when you move money from an IRA over to a Roth, you're going to pay ordinary income on the amount that you've converted. But when you convert money from a traditional IRA to a Roth IRA, the income tax is taxable as of whatever your marginal tax rate is. So it's one of these things where Roth conversions can make a ton of sense if it's pre-tax money and you're trying to convert it over to a Roth, but it really comes down to your tolerance or your threshold to be able to pay taxes off of whatever that amount is. So again, regular contributions are allowed at any age with a Roth. However, your income can become the variable that will determine if you're eligible or not. Now, part of the reason that we look at doing Roth conversions is because the distributions are income tax free, but also because there's no required minimum distributions off of those. So when we look at reasons as to why someone should look at doing Roth conversions, if you believe that income tax rates are going to go up higher in the future, we should look at doing conversions. If you expect your income and spending to go up significantly faster than inflation between now and the end of your plan, should also look at doing conversions. If you think that income tax rates all go up in the future, for example, to balance the budget, to pay off some of the stimulus money, then we should look at getting money into Roths again, so it's growing tax-free. Also, if you're in a scenario where your required minimum distributions, we affectionately call it RMD prison, but it's where your required minimum distributions are greater than what your living expenses are. So let's say, for example, you're only spending 50,000 a year, but you're required to take out 100. Well, that means we've got 50,000 of excess RMDs, which is causing your taxable income to go up each year. And then lastly, if you anticipate leaving a large legacy to family or children, then again, we'd like to be getting as much of that money over into an environment where it's going to transition to them tax-free. All right, I have a couple questions that have come in. I want to make sure I address them. So income impact for Roth IRAs, not Roth 401k, is that correct? Could you clarify? So again, the income threshold. So you can make any amount of money and contribute to a Roth 401k. I'm glad you asked this question. I want to hit this real quick. So as I mentioned, you have a total that you can put in of 19,500 if you're under 50, 26,000 if you're over the age of 50. Now, with that, you have the ability to put that either into the pre-tax portion or the Roth 401k portion. It's either or, and you can do a combination. So any amount that you put into a Roth 401k, it's reducing that 26,000 threshold that you're eligible to put in. Now, related to that though, remember, after-tax money is going into the Roth. So if you're in a situation where you're in a high bracket and you're putting money into the Roth 401k, it's sacrificing some of the amount of this 26,000 that we're eligible to use to reduce taxable income. Now, there also is no income threshold to do after-tax contributions. So I'm just going to keep using the over 50 example. I know there's attendees that are under the age of 50, but again, if you're over the age of 50, you have the ability to put a total of 64,500 in. 26,000 can be pre-tax or Roth 401k. The remaining 38,500 can go in on an after-tax basis. All right, a couple other questions came in. For an IRA, does income have to be earned, or can pensions and dividends be used to fund an IRA? Great question. In order to do a contribution, you have to have what is called earned income. So dividend income, pension income does not count towards earned income. However, if you're fortunate enough to have restricted stock grants after you've retired, those would count towards earned income. Also, if you have imputed income for a life insurance policy, for example, that's earned income. Or if you just contract, consult, something of that sort, that can also be earned income as well. Great question. All right, another question. If I have 150,000 in a traditional IRA, can I contribute 7,000 for 2020 and then convert the 7,000 to the Roth? Or do I have to convert the 150 amount as well and pay ordinary income tax on the gains in addition to converting the 7,000 with no tax? That's actually a fantastic question as well. You're actually talking a little bit about what we call the backdoor Roth. Now, in order to do the $7,000 contribution and then immediately convert it over to the Roth, it's most effective if you have no IRA account balances, because that entire conversion is tax-free. If you'd like to do the $7,000 contribution to the IRA, but you have a balance, you have to do what's called a pro rata amount. So you're not forced in this example to convert the entire $150,000 IRA. But basically what's going to happen is if you convert the 7,000 of after tax you put in, it's going to get treated as 7/150th is tax free. So only a pro rata amount of that conversion would go over tax free. Great question though. All right. So all of this is setting the stage for what is a mega backdoor Roth. Now, one of the things that we like to talk a lot about is the fact that you have the ability to accumulate potentially a very significant amount of after-tax money in your savings plan. Now, what we're specifically looking at is two different portions that are related to a 401k. What is your basis, which is called your tax paid. Now, this is an example of an ExxonMobil savings plan that they have what's called pre-87, post-86 contributions. And by the way, this is very different than what's listed as after tax. So here, think of it as the basis. The pre-87, post-86 amount is what you've put in on an after-tax basis. But what's listed on your after-tax account includes appreciation. So there's growth there. And all of that appreciation is actually before tax. Now, what the mega backdoor Roth strategy is it actually gives you the ability to take out a portion of this after-tax, have it go over into a Roth IRA, but also at the same time take out the respectable gains off of it and have that go over into a traditional IRA. Now, here is this example in a little bit more detail. So what happens is this particular household had $274,049.15 of basis, pre-87, post-86 tax paid. That's what they put in on an after-tax account. Now it's grown. It's grown up to $562,756.85. So what happens is we're going to do what's called a tax paid withdrawal, maximum allowable with no suspension. We don't want to impact the ability to do future contributions. But what we're then able to do is say, all right, I want to take out that tax paid amount. So the $274,049.15. We're going to have to do a little bit of math here. They're going to look at how much the gain is. We're then going to divide the basis by the gross amount, and that percentage is what's eligible to go to the Roth. So in this example, we just took 274,049 divided by 56,756. You multiply it by the gross amount that's eligible to come out, and that portion can go to the Roth. So in this case, it was 133,455.39. But at the same time, too, we also had to take out the gain. The gain portion, which is, again, it's pre-tax, it will be rolled over to a traditional IRA, and that would then be $140,593.76. So the point of all of this is if you have a pretty significant amount of tax paid credit balance, and significance all relative, right? It could be 20 grand, and this is a bigger example. But if you have money that you're not going to need in there for other strategies, we need to be incorporating looking at things like net unrealized appreciation and what impact that may or may not have. But while it's in the savings plan, it's growing on a pre-tax basis. Part of what we're going to want to look at is if we don't need it to be in there for other tax strategies we're looking at, we might want to look at getting it over into a place where now the growth is happening on a tax-free basis. So in this example, right, we're going to do a tax paid withdrawal of $274,000. 133 of it's now going to go over to a Roth IRA where it's going to grow tax-free forever. Not to mention, it's not counted in the math for future required minimum distributions. And all of that growth, which is continuing to compound, won't be part of that math for RMDs. There's a lot of benefit to that. And you also have $140,593 that'll go to the traditional IRA. Now, that's still pre-tax, but you have the ability to diversify and have other investment choices. But related to this, you still will have 140,000 of after-tax money, tax paid money, still sitting in the savings plan available for other strategies that we're looking at. So everyone's situation is going to be a little bit different, but it's important to look at this in terms of your overall plan and see if that makes sense. Had another question come in. When you establish that traditional IRA, won't it affect conversions because you now have a basis? Yes. So thank you for asking that question. But when you now have an IRA, and this actually goes back to the earlier question where somebody said they have a $150,000 IRA and they can't do the backdoor strategy. Well, okay, now you're going to have a pre-tax basis. This will eliminate the ability to do, well, excuse me, it won't eliminate, but it will make it now a taxable event if you do a normal backdoor conversion. It won't make sense to do that. And I'm going to tell you why in a second here as I use some of these examples. Somebody had said the 288,000, which is the 562 minus the 274 amount goes into traditional IRA as well, correct? Yes, that is correct. So the gain off of the basis is all pre-tax. And ultimately, when you've retired and you decide to roll your 401k out of your respective savings plan or custodian, any of the gain off of your after-tax amount, that will all have to stay pre-tax. So it'll roll into a traditional IRA. But you can still utilize this 274, the basis, for some of these different tax strategies. Now, fast forward, let's say this individual decided to retire and we were going to roll everything out of the 401k plan. Well, then what we would do at that particular point in time, if they didn't need this, again, I'm just using this number, the 274,000 for NUA or other tax strategies, then we're just going to have all of that go to the Roth IRA. And since we're going to be doing this ahead of that while they're still working, and we're going to be incrementally pulling portions of the after tax out, well, whatever's left over in that account, if we're not using it for another tax strategy, then we'll have it go to the Roth IRA at retirement then as well. All right, so I want to use some examples, different salary scenarios to kind of demonstrate the why and why this makes a lot of sense. So here's a household that has an income of $175,000. We're just going to assume that they're in the 24% marginal bracket. Now, what we're doing here is we're going to say we want 12% of their contributions to go in on a pre-tax basis. That will max out the $19,500. We also want them doing the catch up on a pre-tax basis of $541.67. That will max out the $6,500. And then related to that, on an annual basis, we want 8% to go in on an after-tax basis. This allows for $14,000 to go into the after-tax account. It's a total amount of contributions of $40,000. Now, the reason this still makes sense is because we can use this $14,000 and do the mega backdoor with it. So take the 14 out. If there's respectable gain on the after-tax account, we'll take that out as well. But we'll take the 14 out, we'll get it into a Roth where it's growing tax-free. And to the earlier question where it would eliminate the ability to do a backdoor, well, we're now able to do 2 times the amount that we would have otherwise done within the backdoor contribution. And then, oh, by the way, at the end of the year, so this is just annual contributions, but oh, by the way, at the end of the year, we can go in and if you have some discretionary cash, do a special contribution to get you up to the maximum of allowable of after tax that goes into the plan. Somebody asked the question, so you don't do any of this until retirement? No, actually, I'm talking about doing it while you're still working. And here's the example. So to build off of this one, they can actually do an additional $24,500 of extra after-tax contributions that takes it up to the maximum eligible of $38,500. This might actually help make this make a little bit more sense. So what we would do, and this isn't the base case, let's not assume we do a special contribution, but we would put $14,000 of after-tax money into the 401k. Think of it as a pit stop here. And then we convert it over to the Roth, so it's now growing and accumulating tax-free forever. And here's just an example to show, all hypothetical, but we're showing a 10-year period of time, assuming a 6% growth rate. But you're going to put $14,000 a year in here all the way out. And this is assuming your income doesn't go up. It's just assuming you put the 8% after-tax contribution into your 401k each year. But as that continues to grow and accumulate, you would have put in 140,000, but it's now worth $189,552 in this example. So it makes sense if you have the ability to put more savings in on an after-tax basis into your 401k, get it in there, and then use the 401k as a conduit to convert it out over into a Roth IRA. Now, here's an example for a household that's a little higher income threshold, 350,000 of compensation. Their marginal tax brackets at the 32% basis. And here we would recommend a 6% pre-tax contribution and an 11% after-tax contribution, in addition to doing $541.67 of catch-up. Now, this will max out the $19,500 at 11% of 350. You will max out the after-tax at $38,500. And then with doing the $541.67, you also max out the catch-up contribution for a total of $64,000. Now, obviously, the $38,500 is higher than $7,000. So going back to a couple of these questions around if it would disqualify you or make doing the backdoor less effective, the answer is yes. But ultimately, I'm going to make the argument that $38,500 of savings is better than $7,000. If I can get all of that over into a Roth, that makes a ton of sense. Can you do a mega backdoor 401k and the $7,000 outside of the plan in a given year? The answer is yes. It really does depend on your current income situation. So for example, if you're married and under the 208 income threshold, you can just do an outright contribution to a Roth. If you're over the threshold, we then just need to look at if there's any pre-tax portion to that or not. So going back to this example here, where there was gain on it. And because there was gain on it, we had to have a portion go to the IRA. And that's what makes the backdoor, the 7,000, less effective for future contributions. Great question. But going back to this example with the higher income threshold, so they're maxing this out. They've got the ability to put 38,500 in. And candidly, I look at this as, let's find the lemonade out of the lemons we've got with all of these companies that are suspending 401k matches. You have the ability to save more on an after-tax basis in your 401k plans right now. Let's flip it all over into a Roth so it can be growing tax-free. And same example, right? So now we would put 38,500 in to the 401k and then immediately convert it over to the Roth. As we look at this accumulation, well, now same example as before, using a 6% growth rate, this particular individual has saved 385,000, but with just assuming some growth over the next 10 years, projected to be worth somewhere around 521,000 total. So this is a really, really cool strategy. Again, it's called a tax paid withdrawal, maximum allowable with no suspension. You do have the ability to do this strategy twice a year with the ExxonMobil plan. It's also twice a year with the Shell plan. Every plan has slightly different nuances, but if you're in a situation where you've got some extra cash, you have the ability to do some savings, really love looking at this. Had another question come in. Can do 7,000 outside the plan via the backdoor as well, correct? Yes, you can do a $7,000 contribution and convert it to a Roth still as well. But if doing the mega backdoor created an IRA, then that full 7,000 would not be able to convert over completely tax-free. So just something to be sensitive to. Someone asked, do you recommend doing this once a year or twice a year? To be honest, it really depends on your situation and when you have the ability to put these after-tax contributions in. Most of the time for us, we're doing it once a year because typically most employees' contributions are going in front-loaded on the front end of the year, all pre-tax. And it's not until the back end of the year that we get all the after-tax in. And if we happen to have not done enough to fully max it out, then we need to go in and do a special contribution before December 15th of the calendar year, which by the time all of it posts, we usually just do it in January of the next year. But if you do have the ability to get a material amount of this done early on in the year, then I would do it twice a year. Just look at it in July and then look at it again in January. Great question. Can you talk about mega backdoor Roth when in retirement? So the short answer is mega backdoor Roth in retirement won't exist because you're not going to be doing after-tax contributions in retirement. Now, you do have the ability to do tax-paid withdrawals in retirement and roll it over into an IRA and a Roth IRA. But I'm going to make the argument, if you're retired, you might want to consider just going ahead and doing a full rollover, simply because you'll have the ability to get all of this stuff respectively moved out. And especially if there's gain off of it, you're not going to fully be able to max out the amount of after tax that's able to come out. Now, the pros of company 401k plans are their low cost. To me, the challenge is that they're limited investment options. You're limited on the amount of trades you can do each month, and you're limited on the execution point. So like, for example, with the ExxonMobil plan, you get the average price the following day. I would say in these market environments, it's been very clearly able to demonstrate value, being able to be more specific where you're investing. But also, let's say, for example, you have company stock that we want to sell. If it blips up to a point where you're finally tolerant to selling it, but then next thing you know, the next day, all of a sudden it corrects. Well, again, with, like, for example, the ExxonMobil plan, you get the average price the following day. So we saw it a couple of weeks ago when it ran up to 50 for a day. And then all of a sudden, the next day stock's down 5%. Well, anybody who executed on the day that it was 50, they actually got the average price the following day. So it's not quite as strategic or guided as you might want to be. If it's out in a brokerage account, you can use things like good till cancel orders. Some people call them GTCs, to be more specific on the investment strategy. Can you do special contributions to 401k plans after retiring or leaving the company, as long as we have retained the 401k without rolling it over somewhere else? Great question. Glad you asked this. We've been getting this one a lot, especially with the voluntary category. So you have the ability to do a special contribution. The last one you can do within your 401k is the year of retirement. So we're seeing this a lot with the voluntary group that just went from ExxonMobil as at the end of January. February 1st was their first day of retirement. But with them, they have the ability, as of February 1, they can do a special contribution for the 2021 plan year. And then as soon as the money posts, then you can do all of these different strategies. But again, you have to have the ability to write that big check in order to be able to get it in there. More often than not, in most cases right now, we're focusing on cash flows for retirees. But again, there are certain situations where there's some excess cash. Getting it over into the Roth makes a lot of sense as well. Okay, so over the long term, would a passive approach as forced by plan rules lead to better long-term outcome? I don't totally understand the context of the question. Are we talking about investments or investment strategy, or are we talking about savings and accumulation? I'll let you maybe clarify that for me before I answer that. Real quick, while I'm waiting for that response, this is the strategy that's called tax paid withdrawal, maximum allowable with no suspension. This means we're actually taking the money out of the 401k plans and moving it into accounts at a brokerage firm. It's very different than in-plan conversions. I wanted to specifically highlight the ExxonMobil in-plan conversion provisions, simply because a lot of people get hung up on this and they get confused by this. They think that converting within the plan is the same as doing the strategy, and it's absolutely not. And a lot of times it leads to some surprise tax bills. So point of clarification, and I would say always have your advisor verify this stuff. But employees who are younger than 59 and a half, they can convert a portion or all of their balance in their after-tax and general accounts to the Roth conversion account. However, funds in the before tax account cannot be converted. Employees that are over 59 and a half, they can convert any portion of their accounts, whether they're actively employed or not. Now, if you think about it, the basis of your ExxonMobil stock does not matter for in-plan conversions. Really, what we're thinking about while it's in the qualified environment, there is no such thing as cost basis, because when we're doing conversions, we're just creating taxable events. So a lot of folks were asking us when the stock was down, should we do conversions in the plan? And I'm going to say it's no different than if you were converting other assets. And the reason for that is because ultimately ExxonMobil's plan, they make you actually liquidate the stock and then buy it back. And as quickly as the stock's been moving, you could have 5 days where we're not invested, and all of a sudden we've actually completely diminished most of the value of doing the stock conversions in plan. Now, one thing that we talk about related to this, so let's say the entire after-tax account, let's just say 60% of its contributions, 40% is appreciation, then we know that if we convert 100% of the after-tax account within the plan, 40% of that's going to create taxable income. And same if you did a smaller percentage. So if you did 50% of the after-tax account, then 40% of the 50% is going to create a tax bill. So my strong preference really is if we're trying to do these strategies of getting money over into Roths, really consider the tax paid withdrawal, not an in-plan conversion. Now, in-plan conversions, we can do these guys once a year. You can also convert existing non-Roth savings accounts, which can be fully vested into the Roth conversion account. You must request these by December 15th of the year in order to get them to count in that year. Now, as I mentioned, employees younger than 59 and a half can convert after-tax general and stock match accounts to the Roth conversion account. However, the funds on the pre-tax account cannot be converted. And then, as I also mentioned, anyone who's over 59 and a half, you can convert all of the accounts over. Retirees and terminees can convert a portion of all their savings plan balances to the Roth conversion account, but the in-plan conversion does not count against the 2 times a year max tax paid withdrawal status. So I've hit a lot of stuff today. Let me see if there's any other questions that came in. Will the appreciated portion be taxed in the calendar year when it's converted? Yes. If you do an in-plan conversion, back to this, this slide here, if there's gain and you convert it in the plan, yes, it's taxable in that year. Whereas if we go back to the tax paid withdrawal strategy all the way back here, and using this example, if you do a tax paid withdrawal, you're getting a portion of the basis out over to the Roth and a portion of the gain out over to a traditional IRA, and this creates no tax at all. So part of that's one of the biggest reasons why I'm a huge advocate for do the tax paid withdrawal strategy if it makes sense in your situation. All right. I've hit a lot of things today. I'm sure there's probably some more questions. You know, what I would probably emphasize the most is if you haven't taken us up on the opportunity to have a one-on-one consulting session, delighted to do so. As I said, it's absolutely no cost. It is absolutely no obligation. Great way to see where you're at, look at things a little bit more holistically. And if it makes sense to look at diving into strategies like this, we're more than delighted to give a recommendation. You've seen some of the planning tools on here that we use in terms of what we recommend for our clients to save, how to save, and then ultimately, as we're doing these tax paid withdrawal strategies, what makes sense for them. Let's see. If a retiree does an in-plan Roth conversion, does that eliminate the ability to do the NUA? Not necessarily, right? A retiree, yes, a retiree will be considered a distribution, and ultimately that'll kill NUA. Would not recommend doing conversions if you're over the age of 59 and a half. If you're under 59 and a half, you can do an in-plan conversion and then you'll get a reset at 59 and a half. But if you're over 59 and a half and doing in-plan Roth conversions, that'll impact the ability to do NUA, and definitely something to be mindful of when you're doing those types of things. Great question. All right. We do have a couple more events coming up here over the next couple of weeks. Next week, I'm doing the retirement timeline presentation. On February 24th, we're going to be doing the Social Security and planning strategies presentation. And then on March the 3rd, we're going to be doing our presentation on how discount rates affect lump sum calculations. Here's our contact information. I'm sure Mindy or Sydney and my team will be following up to ask if there's any additional questions. I apologize if I missed any today, but delighted to be a resource however we can help. But most importantly, stay healthy and stay well. And we're here for you if you need us. Thank you.